All right, now we are ready to begin construction on the classic shirt. And the first thing that we do in our order of operation is stay stitching. Now, stay stitching goes in curved areas where there are bias edges that might possibly stretch out during your construction time, causing a change in size and not allowing other pieces to sew on properly in that curved area. On our shirt, it's going to be on the neck back, which this is the yoke piece, so it is the neck back. And there are two yoke pieces, and we're going to put it singly in each piece. And the other place where we will be placing stay stitching is on our neck front. Two pieces of that, from the shoulder seam to the front seam. What you must remember is that stay stitching is a permanent stitch, and therefore we use a regular stitch length, your regular thread that you're going to be sewing the garment with, and all of it is placed within the seam allowance. So that would mean it is in this area. If my stitch line is here, then this is the seam allowance, and my stay stitching belongs inside of that seam allowance, not out here in the body of the garment on this side of our stitch line. The stitch line on men's shirts, classic shirts, at the neck, and the neck only, is generally a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Your pattern will tell you this, so check that to make sure what seam allowance is at the neckline and for the collar sewing. Since this is a 3/8 inch seam allowance, that means that my stitch line is right here for the garment. When I get ready to put the collar on. So I am going to place my stay stitching at 1/4 of an inch away, which is actually 1/8 of an inch away from the stitch line. But somewhere right in here is where my stay stitching will be. If you have 5/8 inch seam allowances on your garment, and they have not changed around the neck for a narrower seam allowance, you would be stitching at this. If this was 5/8, you'd be 1/8 of an inch away, and that really means that from a cut edge, you'd be stitching 1/2 an inch away from the cut edge. So the rule is, again, that stay stitching belongs 1/8 of an inch away from your stitch line, and it is placed inside of the seam allowance. So another rule that goes with stay stitching is we stitch from the widest to the narrowest of the garment. So in necklines, that would mean this is the widest right now, so I would begin my stitching here and go up to a narrower part, the shoulder. In the back neckline, we want to always stitch one direction. So in that curve, So I'm going to start at the center back where it's the widest, and I'm going to stitch to the narrowest, to the shoulder. And then I'm going to come back, place my needle again here at the widest, and stitch to the narrowest. So I'm going to do that now. Again, it's on each piece separately, not the pieces together. So I'm going to move the camera over just a slight bit. Okay, so we're going to start here in the center back. I have my little clip showing where my center back is right there. And I'm going to stitch at 1/4 of an inch, which if my needle position is in the center of my foot, the general rule will be that from that needle to out here is 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to have my fabric raw edge go right underneath my foot edge right there. And that should provide me with a good guide for 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. Looking for my other thread here. So I can hold on to them and prevent any of that bird nesting. Yeah, I got those. Find that center again. Position it. Nope. Back stitching is necessary on stay stitching. And again, you're using your regular average setting for your stitching, or slightly less. So somewhere between 2 and 2.5 is generally what you're going to find for most machines as the average. And take it through that curve. Again, no back stitching. And we're going to come back, start here, and now stitch this direction. So it's the same direction as what's going on the other bias curve area. Turn them over so we can use the guide of the foot. I'm in the same place. Holding my thread. Isn't all tangled underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other areas, and then I'll meet you back here. So here we are back, and I've placed all the stay stitching in. My 2 front neck and my 2 yoke back necks. I started in the center on that yoke back and then out. Started here and then up. Started here and then up. And just a reminder, the rule is you place that permanent stitch at your regular stitching length an 1/8 of an inch away from your stitch line or your seam line, and it's inside the seam allowance. So again, on this shirt, this neck is a 3/8 of an inch stitching seam, meaning that I will place my stay stitching 1/8 of an inch away from that in the seam allowance edge. So it ended up being 1/4 of an inch away from the cut edge on all 4 of these pieces. So now we'll go on to step 2, which is doing our pocket front.